This week we're happy to welcome you to our new project car, which is this Toyota FJ40 behind me. It's not really that new, it's a 1982 truck, so it's been around for a while. Anyway, you get the idea. Now, given that we're kind of petrol heads at HPA and generally I spend most of my automotive life trying to make cars go faster, you might be wondering why I'm interested in a FJ40. Pretty slow. They don't make much power. I don't actually think this thing makes 100 horsepower, and it's definitely no rocket ship, but for some reason they've always had a bit of an attraction to the FJ40. The FJ40s also are getting pretty hard to find. One thing that old Toyotas do incredibly well is they rust. So finding one of these that hasn't fallen to pieces from rust is pretty tricky. And we've been looking for an FJ40 for a fair while, and we actually ended up with two. So this is our second FJ40. The first FJ40 we bought sight unseen, and it looked really tidy. The previous owner had done a frame off or body off restoration on the frame, and he had fixed up most of the rusty panels, but he'd fixed them up using fiberglass replacements, and I really wanted to keep this pretty authentic and pure, so I really wanted something that was steel. At the time I was looking at replacement panels, and these are all available, particularly out of the US. Trying to find second-hand ones that aren't all rusted to pieces, obviously really difficult. There are some reproduction parts that are pretty good quality, but by the time we looked at all of the cost of the new panels, plus shipping them to New Zealand, plus panel, plus paint, it all started getting really expensive and really hard. That's when this one here came up for what was a pretty fair price given the quality of it. Now this one had had a full restoration done on the bodywork, but the frame was existing factory, hadn't been touched, which actually works perfect considering what we're planning to do with it. Now first of all, a little bit about the truck itself. Now, I've called it an FJ40, and the purists will pull me up on this. It's not actually an FJ40, it's a BJ42. Same, but different. Essentially, the difference there is that this is powered by the 3B diesel engine rather than the inline 6. Doesn't really matter, because what we're planning on doing is modernizing this a little bit, getting it up to speed, and I'm going to talk about that. But before we go through that, I'll just talk a little bit more about what these FJ40s are. So basically a utilitarian vehicle that's designed to be pretty well bulletproof. You can take them off-road, you can take them through paddocks. Obviously we're really popular for farmers. They're also really easy to work on and repair, so they're basically designed so that they can be rebuilt, modified, fixed in the field where you can't get to a workshop. So that's kind of the design behind them. They're really basic. There's not a lot of technology applied to them, and these things haven't changed since, or haven't changed much at least, since the very first models, I think, came out in the late 60s, early 70s. Fact check that anyway. But the reality is that they're a far cry from our modern four-wheel drive. So what we've got here, front and rear, is leaf spring suspension. It does the job, but wow, it is a horrible ride, and that's one of the things that we really want to address. Particularly on the open road, it's not a particularly pleasant drive. Oh God, both of you. You get it off-road, it's super duper bouncy as well. On top of this, it has drum brakes all around. Now, everyone complains about the FJ40 drum brakes and how bad they are, so I wasn't expecting big things when we got this truck. The reality is, I actually haven't found them too bad. Of course, they're not as good as disc brakes, but they're workable for the time being. One thing that I definitely don't like, though, is the lack of power steering, particularly with the bigger wheels and tires that we've fitted to this. It's a bit of a chore driving it around at low speed, and you get a bit of a workout. I like to say with these trucks that every drive is a bit of an adventure. You never quite know what's going to happen next. With that steering as well, the other problem with old steering boxes, they tend to get a little bit sloppy, so can be a little bit risky driving this. Anything over about 80 kilometers an hour on the open road, you tend to be using about half a lock of turn side to side to try and keep the thing within your own lane. So fortunately, it doesn't really go much faster than about 80k anyway. Obviously, that's not what it was designed for. The engine in it, as I mentioned, 3B. It's a diesel engine, not a huge amount of power, a reasonable amount of torque, but when matched with the 4-speed gearbox, the 2-speed transfer case, it gets the job done, and particularly in low ratio for off-roading around places like this, it's actually pretty good. There's not a lot of places you can't get to. So what have we got planned for it? Well, one of the reasons that I got interested in the FJ40 in the first place was I was following the likes of Icon over in the US, who build sort of restomod versions of the FJ40, albeit with Icon's FJ40s there's not actually a lot of FJ left in it. I think it's basically the chassis tag. They're using a complete custom chassis from Art Morrison, an alloy body, and they're fitting a range of different engines but based around the Chev LS V8. On the other hand, there's also the FJ company who are kind of doing the same thing. Theirs are a little bit more true to the original form, including retaining the modified factory chassis rails, steel bodywork, etc. They're putting a late model Toyota V6 in them. Both of those companies do an amazing job. Their product is outstanding, but you're also looking at about 180, maybe 200,000 US dollars for a turnkey truck. And I don't doubt that they're worth it, but first of all, I don't have that sort of money to spend on a truck, and also we kind of like the adventure of doing it ourselves. So we're basically going to be looking at doing something similar, although on a slightly more dulled down budget. The other thing we were looking at as well is the Roadster shop over in the US, and they are well known for making custom chassis to go on a range of different American muscle cars, as well as some of the trucks like the Ford Bronco. So again, they're making a custom chassis and modernizing the suspension, adding coilover suspension all round, or even independent front suspension. So those are the sort of companies that we've been following to get some ideas for this project. And essentially what we're planning on doing is ditching the leaf spring suspension all round and modernizing it. We're going to be using some slightly beefier diffs to take the power we're planning on making, and we're also going to be fitting coilovers all round. We're also going to be adding anti-roll bars front and rear, which doesn't really help off-road but is going to definitely be beneficial out on the road, and that's probably where it's still going to spend the majority of its time. It's fun putting these sort of trucks through rivers and up muddy trails, but given that the parts are getting harder to come by, I want to be a little bit mindful of not really doing any damage to it at the same time. So it's definitely not being built for hardcore off-road use. With the rear, we're going to go with a 4-link suspension style, and we're going to be using angulated or triangulated top links, so we don't need a panhard rod for lateral location. The front will be a 3-link using a panhard rod for lateral location, as that's going to be a requirement. So that covers basically what we're going to be doing with the suspension side of things. On top of this, the engine is the next obvious area we want to focus on. And while the LS has been swapped into just about everything, I can't fault the power, the torque, and the cost effectiveness of an LS swap. I really am a bit of a purist and wanted to keep the engine and chassis the same, so we needed to be picking something from the Toyota stable. There's a range of options there, and given that we've got a bit of experience now with the 1UZ, 3UZ based engines from our race car, it made sense to go down that path. It's a nice engine in stock form. We're not going to be modifying it. We're aiming for somewhere around about the 300, maybe 350 horsepower mark. So internally, we're going to be leaving it stock standard. And particularly for off-road use, we're more interested in getting good low RPM torque rather than trying to make lots of power at high RPM. That's not what it's really about. Now, mating that up to a new 5-speed gearbox is going to be another consideration there. Haven't finalized that. There's a few options. At the moment, we're looking at the R151, which is found behind the likes of the Toyota Hilux. So a few considerations there around the transfer case, but that's basically the angle we're going to be taking. So we're pretty early into this project. We have got the donor engine sitting in the workshop now, and at the moment, it's just a case of sourcing some of the other components that we're going to need. We're coming into winter here in Queenstown, so we're going to be pulling the truck off the road and getting stuck into that project fairly soon. And I'm not unhappy about that, because the FJ40 certainly lacks a few creature comforts, particularly when we're waking up to snow and sub-zero temperatures. And you know that it's not going to work out too well on a cold winter's morning when you can actually see outside through the top of the door because it doesn't close properly. So few fitment issues that we're going to be working through there, as well well as adding hopefully a heater and a defrosting unit that's a little bit more effective. So you'll be able to follow that project over the coming months as we update you on what we're doing. So there we are, quick introduction to our FJ40 project. Lots in store over the coming months, and if you don't want to miss out on any further updates, make sure you subscribe. If you've got questions, ask them in the comments. Next week, we're going to be catching up with our sister company Racecraft, and we're going to be talking about corner weighting, what that is, and how it can improve the handling and balance of your race car.